People without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. If you have no confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life. Liberate the minds of men, and ultimately you will liberate the bodies of men. After his observations, while on his many travels, Garvey pondered and asked himself these questions. Where is the black man's government? Where is his king and his kingdom? Where is his president, his country, his men of big affairs? I could not find them. And then he declared, I will help to make them. Garvey's life would forever be changed by his belief in the redemption of Africans at home and abroad. He heavily spoke about the need for greater loyalty and the loyalty of race. He also mentioned that as a race we would march out in answer to the cry of our fathers, who cry out to us for the redemption of our country, our motherland, Africa. Garvey was extremely passionate about education. It was at the heart of his movement, and when he left Jamaica in 1916 for the United States, his sole mission was to secure funding for schools to be built in Jamaica, and these schools will be modeled on Booker T. Washington's Tuskegee Institute. The Negro World was published worldwide, and it was available in Spanish, French, and English. However, Garvey also proceeded to purchase the small wood quarry, which became the Liberty University. This was located in Claremont, Virginia School, and a few years before his untimely passing. He also founded the School of African Philosophy to train future leaders of the UNIA. Garvey's focus was also on self-reliance. He believed that the black community should be self-reliant and should work towards finding their own solutions. He mentioned action, self-reliance, the vision of self, and the future have been the only means by which the oppressed have been seen and realized the light of their own freedom. In Garvey's mind, self-reliance was one of the cornerstones, the foundation of black emancipation. Redemption, self-reliance, and education became the purpose of Garvey's mission. His belief was that all three of these concepts would formulate a sense of purpose for his race. Garvey was a firm believer that as a people we needed an aim or purpose to survive. This aim and purpose would help us to work towards becoming more united, becoming emancipated, and a more improved people. The UNIA also insisted on the need for organization that was focused on absolute purpose of bettering black people's condition, both on an industrial scale, also commercial, social, religious, and political. Garvey also understood that political influence was based on economic power, and therefore he advocated for black people to focus on entrepreneurship. He also advocated for empowerment. He wanted us to use our opportunities to make every effort towards developing our commercial and industrial standards that would make us comparable with the successful businessmen of other races. The focus of entrepreneurship and empowerment was to lead us towards becoming solely dependent upon ourselves for our economic existence before our opportunities had passed by. Garvey believed in the power of the community. Both his public and his private life was completely devoted to the upliftment of Africans at home and abroad. His focus was also on economic power that would be generated within the community for the use of the community. Garvey firmly mentioned, "From the silent graves of millions who went down to make me what I am, I shall make for their memory this fight that shall leave a glaring page in the history of man." Garvey was also focused on tradition. He emphasized the need for us to understand and gain knowledge about our history, our origins, and our culture, so that we would understand our foundation and be able to walk and work towards our future. One of Garvey's focus was on the use of knowledge and history of African people to liberate the minds and hearts of his people. Garvey believed that our great men should be acknowledged, they should be remembered, and that they should be celebrated. He also mentioned that we should elevate our people to positions of fame and honor our people, both men and women, who have made distinctive contributions to our racial history. Garvey mentioned that Africa has produced countless numbers of men and women in war and in peace, whose lust and bravery outshine that in any other people. Then why not see good and perfection in ourselves? Garvey's life was all about respect. His mission was to ensure respect for Black people. He stated that a race without authority and power is a race without respect. The life of Marcus Garvey has inspired many other Black leaders. These leaders include Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Kwame Ture, Jomo Kenyatta, Nelson Mandela, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, and Julius Nyerere. Martin Luther King Jr. was quoted saying, "Garvey was the first man on a mass scale to give millions of Negroes a sense of dignity and destiny. He gave us a sense of personhood, a sense of manhood, a sense of somebodyness." Garvey's message resonates still in our current day lives. And many artists, many poets, many writers have quoted this great man. The great Bob Marley has even taken a piece of Garvey's message and placed it in his very famous redemption song. And in this song, Bob Marley says, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." Now this resonates with Garvey's belief in self-reliance, redemption, and education. Marcus Mosiah Garvey, a charismatic Black leader and organizer of the first important American Black nationalist movement between the period 1919 and 1926. His movement was based in New York City's Harlem. Garvey was born on the 17th of August in 1887 in Jamaica. He passed on June 10th, 1940 in London. Garvey attended school in Jamaica, although he was largely self-taught. He traveled through Central America and lived in London from 1912 to 1914. He returned to Jamaica, where he founded the Universal Negro Improvement and Conservation Association and African Communities League on August 1, 1914. This group is called the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or the UNIA. Marcus Mosiah Garvey was the youngest of 11 children by Marcus Mosiah Garvey Sr. and Sarah Ann Richards. As a child, Garvey developed a keen interest in the books from his dad. His dad was a Mason, and Garvey made full use of the extensive family library. At the age of 14, Garvey left school, and he became a printer's apprentice, where he led a strike for higher wages. Garvey was a profound public speaker. He spoke across America, and he urged African Americans to be proud of their race and to focus on their return to Africa, which is their ancestral homeland, and this attracted thousands of supporters. He founded the Black Star Line, which was to provide transportation to Africa, and the Negro Factories Corporation, which was developed to encourage black economic independence. Garvey also unsuccessfully tried to persuade the government of Liberia in West Africa to provide land on which black people from America could settle. Garvey was an orator for the black nationalism and Pan-Africanism movements, and he founded the UNIA. Garveyism would develop and grow and flourish after his passing, and this would inspire others, from the Nation of Islam to the Rastafarian movement. Garvey traveled to London, and he attended Birkbeck College, or the University of London, and worked for African Times and Orient Review, which advocated Pan-African nationalism. In 1919, Garvey and the UNIA launched the Black Star Line, a shipping company that would establish trade and commerce between Africans in America, the Caribbean, South and Central America, Canada, and Africa. At the same time, the Negroes Factory Association would manufacture marketable commodities in large industrial centers in the Western Hemisphere and in Africa. By August 1920, the UNIA had 4 million members and held its first international convention at Madison Square Gardens in New York City, before a crowd of 25,000 people from all over the world. Garvey's belief and his movement's success, the government at the time saw him as an adversary, as a threat to their nation. In 1922, Garvey and 3 other UNIA officials were charged with mail fraud involving the Black Star Line. The trial records indicate several improprieties occurred in the prosecution of the case. It did not help that the shipping line's books contained many accounting irregularities. On the 23rd of June 1923, Garvey was convicted and sentenced to prison for 5 years. He claimed to be a victim of a politically motivated miscarriage of justice. Garvey appealed his conviction, but he was denied. In 1927, he was released from prison and sent to Jamaica. He continued his political activism and the work of the UNIA in Jamaica, and then he moved to London in 1935. However, at the time, his influence had declined. He passed in London in 1940 after several strokes. Due to travel restrictions during the World War II, his body was interred in London. In 1964, his remains were exhumed and taken to Jamaica, his homeland, where the Jamaican government proclaimed him Jamaica's first national hero and reinterred his body at a shrine in the National Heroes Park. Garvey's memory and influence will always remain. His message of pride and dignity inspired many in the early days of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s. In tribute to his many contributions, Garvey's bust has been displayed in the Organization of American States Hall of Heroes in Washington, D.C. The country of Ghana has named his shipping line the Black Star Line and its national soccer team the Black Stars in honor of the great Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Garvey was conferred with the Order of National Hero in 1969. As a youth, Garvey migrated to Kingston. He worked and published a small paper titled The Watchman. He traveled extensively to many countries and observed the poor working and living conditions of black people. He started the UNIA in Jamaica, and this grew into an international organization. This organization encouraged self-government for black people globally, self-help economic projects, and protest against racial discrimination. In 1916, Garvey went to the U.S., where he preached his doctrine of freedom to oppressed blacks throughout the country. Sadly, U.S. officials disapproved of his activities, and he was imprisoned and then deported to Jamaica. In Jamaica, he continued his work, and he also formed the People's Political Party in 1929. However, he was unsuccessful in national elections, but won a seat on the Kingston and St. Andrew Corporation. The world was not ready for Garvey's progressive ideas. So, in the 1930s, he left Jamaica again, and this time he went to England. He was brought back to Jamaica as a hero. His legacy lives on. His legacy is tied up in his philosophy, where he taught us to be proud of our race. He taught us to be united as Africans. He taught us to be self-reliant. And he also focused on the need for us as black people to be organized and for our rulers to govern on behalf of the working classes. Books and articles that have been published about the life of Marcus Garvey include The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, Selected Writings and Speeches of Marcus Garvey, Message to the People, The Tragedy of White Injustice, Emancipated from Mental Slavery, Marcus Garvey, Life and Lessons, Powerful Conversations, The Pioneers of Black Liberation, The Wise Mind of Marcus Garvey, The Gospel According to Marcus Garvey, and also Marcus Garvey, an annotated bibliography. Garvey was a hero. He was a leader, and of course, he transformed many lives, both during his time and after his time had passed. And in today's generation, Garvey continues to influence our generation to strive for greatness and to be proud of who we are. One critical component of Garvey's message that should never be forgotten is that black is beautiful. Like, comment, share, and subscribe.